Outward shouldn't exist in 2019. It's a harsh open world RPG with absolutely no handholding. It's got split screen and online co-op, numerous survival elements, punishing Souls-like combat and complete player autonomy. It's the kind of game that publishers rarely greenlight these days, yet despite all of its jank and bugs, it manages to feel super refreshing. This is a game that feels like it was ripped out of a bygone era, sprinkled with some modern touches and released for the world to enjoy. It's an RPG with a Eurojank feel that was somehow developed in Canada. Outward drops you in the shoes of a player-made character. The character creator itself is kind of as basic as it comes. You pick between a male or female, some hair and facial variations, and that's about it. There's no hand-holding here, although there is a fairly straightforward tutorial to familiarise you with some of the game's elements. You wash up on the shoreline following a shipwreck. Original, I know. Only to discover that there's a bloodline debt on your head thanks to your family and no fault of your own. It's a little bit harsh. With some basic bits of equipment to discover in the initial village, you're then left pretty much to your own devices. Unless of course you're playing in co-op and then you're somewhat less alone, but more on that later. 3 days to pay off your debt. Go. Welcome to Outward. There's no quest markers to point you in the right direction, not even a pointer on your map to show you where your character is. You get hungry, you get thirsty, you can catch a cold by being out in the chilled weather for too long with incorrect clothing. It's a harsh world out there. Oh, and I forgot to mention that you generally die within a few hits too, so good luck. Despite all that though, Outward actually always feels fair. The various systems at play all generally make sense. Sure, there's survival elements such as needing to eat and drink regularly, or Breath of the Wild style heat and cold protection on your gear to survive the changing weather conditions, but it always felt exciting and intriguing to me. It kept me on my toes rather than serving as an annoyance. It all adds to the game rather than detracts. The survival mechanics are tuned just about right, and I really appreciate that. As you roam the lands, enemies will come in all shapes and sizes, from bandits to wildlife and plenty more intimidating monsters. Fighting these foes is done through a fairly straightforward combat system involving dodging, blocking and various attack combos. Stamina management plays a big factor here too. It's reminiscent of the Souls games, only somewhat a little simpler and a whole lot less refined. Avoiding or blocking hits is the name of the game, with attacks feeling deliberate and often slow, leaving you vulnerable to further attack. It all works and it feels just fine, but there's no denying that it could have been a whole lot better. There's crafting here too, ranging from cooking to alchemy and even creating your own weapons and armour. Throw a few items in a pot and hope for the best. Whilst recipes can be found and purchased throughout the game world, if you manage to figure out one for yourself, you'll automatically learn that recipe moving forward. Sure, you could technically just look online, but where's the fun in that? The game gives the player complete freedom in what you decide to tackle, when and how. There's mildly interesting quest lines that keep things flowing and help to provide a sense of direction. Outward even offers various factions to join with unique skills and quest lines, with some decision making to be done as well. The adventure itself is the star of the show here though, as opposed to the story or the characters, which are all fairly weak if I'm honest. The Witcher 3 this is not. But where Outward begins to truly shine is in the numerous unique mechanics and unexpected gameplay systems that end up shaping this entire experience. Something as simple as managing your bag space ends up evolving into an entire gameplay system here. Your bag is the #1 essential piece of equipment throughout the entire game. With limited space, these can hold your gathered items and materials. About to enter a tough battle, trudging around with a heavy bag will affect your ability to fight, obviously. With the press of a button, your character detaches the bag from your back, reducing the stamina drain of various actions such as dodge rolling. You finish the fight and you pick it back up again and head on your merry way. But what about the items in your bag? How can you possibly access all those important bandages, potions and weapons mid-fight if your bag is meters away? Well, in Outward, you can't. Preparing which items are held in your pockets versus which are stored in your backpack requires real thought, and can result in genuine gameplay consequences. I've never seen anything like that in a game. It's one of those simple yet logical gameplay systems that feels completely fair, understandable, but still refreshing at the same time. Roaming through caves requires a light source, of course. A torch could sit in your offhand, but how about simply popping a lantern on your backpack to free up your offhand, whilst providing that all-important light still? Oh, but of course, a lantern on your backpack would still have the light being somewhat blocked by your character. How about a backpack with a wooden pole stuck to it, allowing you to attach a lantern above your head for improved visibility? Yep, that is a thing in Outward. You visit a lush green environment one day only to head off for a nap and wake up in the next to find the snow setting in and a whole different temperature problem to contend with. The weather can change on the fly in this game, whether it's a bit of rain causing a wet debuff or snow resulting in dropping temperature and some all-important need for warmer clothing. Dying in a bandit camp results in you waking up in a prison at that actual camp, having to recover your equipment and escape, albeit with a prison door that's actually just open so you can conveniently wander out of it. It's kind of weird. Again, these are all logical and fair mechanics that most games simply downright ignore. Outright is riddled with these kind of unique and little surprises. Setting up camp and sleeping out in the open world could result in an attack, but instead you could spend some of that sleep time guarding to reduce the chance of being ambushed. It's this constant attention to detail from a mechanical perspective that really makes Outward something special. The game is also playable completely in co-op with another player, be it in split screen or online. Unfortunately, however, the second player is mostly just along for the ride to offer you a helping hand. Your gear and skills come with you, but any story and quest progress remains that of the hosts. Even quest rewards generally just get given to the single player. It's somewhat disappointing given the game itself is otherwise superb cooperatively. When RPGs like Divinity Original Sin 2 have nailed co-op play so well, it's a shame to not see things feeling a little bit more embedded here. Playing with another player opens up further combat opportunities. One player can flank whilst another tanks, and shaping your character with various skill builds that synergise together is great fun too. It feels like the game was meant to be played this way. The online co-op itself was an almost flawless experience too. We never encountered any desync or lag issues whatsoever. The whole thing ran smoothly from beginning to end. It's pretty great stuff. Outward isn't without its issues though. The game has plenty of bugs, dodgy animations and glitches. For example, we had player 2's backpack vanish upon death. The bag compass icon still existed, but the bag itself was just gone. By getting ourselves killed again, the bag miraculously reappeared. Phew. Thankfully, the majority of the issues we encountered were more amusing and less impactful on the experience itself. There's admittedly an overall sense of jank here. The game's UI isn't the best. The NPCs in villages wander around the exact same paths, and the majority of buildings can't even be entered. There's no ability to see other areas on the map unless you're actually in them, and the lack of fast travel can start to feel like a needlessly harsher mission later on in the game, having to run from one end of the map to the other to reach another region, all whilst potentially encountering the need for hunger, sleep, enemies, weather, disease, etc. can at times turn what could be a 5-minute job into a 45-minute one, and it's times like these which really damages the game's pacing. The world itself often feels a little lifeless and static too. In an era of video games offering stunning immersive environments and huge conversation trees, varied NPC routines and lush foliage and dynamic wildlife, Outward can instead feel somewhat stuck in a previous generation. The same can be said for the game's visuals too, which certainly look a little too basic, albeit with some fairly nice art design here and there. However, I'd be doing the overall presentation an injustice if I didn't mention just how brilliant the game's soundtrack is. Honestly, it's surprisingly good. It's so good actually that we found ourselves humming the game's tunes repeatedly whilst playing. Despite these issues though, developer 9 Dots Studio have managed to create something special here. What they've managed to pull off with such a small team of 9 members is genuinely impressive. Outward is doing things that no other RPGs or games for that matter are even doing. When was the last time you played a sprawling open world RPG with split screen co-op? There's a whole bunch of interesting mechanics throughout the game, many which I haven't even mentioned, that often lead to a heartwarming sense of discovery as we played through the game. It's rare these days to play through a game which leaves so many significant core mechanical discoveries completely up to the player to figure out. It's refreshing stuff. Outward won't be for everyone. It's a harsh, adventurous sim that borrows elements from various other titles whilst weaving in a whole bunch of its own. It's not perfect, and it certainly has some issues. However, there is a hell of a lot to like here. It is an ambitious, adventurous title that punches way above its weight. In fact, Outward wholeheartedly deserves to spawn a whole new subgenre of its own. Be sure to like, share and subscribe for more content like this.